You have experience in AI as a doctoral researcher in computer science and AI, which is the current trend of these days.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And what do you research at the moment as a doctoral researcher?
Currently, I do research in AI security. That's my main focus. There are some slightly different topics that I work on, but so far I've been working on AI security and how people can mitigate these risks that obviously come with uh, machine learning models, specifically image-based models. But there's all sorts of risks involved in NLP, image recognition, audio, different types of AI models.
Could you give like an example of like
Example.
a big risk you would say? One of the biggest risks you would see in the future, maybe as AI develops more, where those security risks could cost maybe human lives.
That's a good question. So I specifically work with a type of attack called adversarial attack, and adversarial attacks are a way to kind of mess with the input of the model so that it predicts wrongly, right? And for example, if it's a video stream, if
Yeah.
it's a video stream, you can add some sort of random noise. By noise, I mean videos are like numbers on computers, right? So if you add like small numbers, the computer thinks it's like very different, right? For example, a self-driving car might wrongly look at like a stop sign as a go sign, right? So that's a big problem, for example. If it's a slow down sign, if it might think it's like a 60 miles per hour sign. That's one of the biggest problems. I have seen research where people did that to Tesla. Like this,
Really?
yeah, it's very interesting. And it's thankfully you don't see a lot of problems, but it is possible to be like people can do these kinds of attacks on even self-driving cars.
So how do these attacks usually operate if you could kind of
Break it down. So machine learning works in a way that we have a model, we have an input, a model, and an output. So it can be an image input. Our model is this huge function per se. It takes this input, image, audio, video, whatever it is, and it tells you something about this data, right? The simplest models, image classification models that I can think of. For example, you give it a picture of a cat and a dog, and it tells you what it is, right? A cat or a dog, right? So the goal of adversarial attacks, this specific type of AI attack, is that it messes with the input. It adds some sort of noise to the input image or different types of data in order to for the model to misclassify the type. So you give it a picture of a cat. It looks like a cat. You look at it, it looks like a cat. But the model thinks it's a dog. And that's a problem because one, it shows you like the root problem in machine learning. That is, machine learning models don't really understand the world the correct way per se. We understand the world very, like you look at the picture of a cat and it's a cat. It's
yeah.
nothing different. But computers understand things in a discrete manner. It's not like for us it looks like a real thing, but for computers it's just numbers. And portraying this real world into numbers, it causes a lot of difficulties. One of the difficulties is these types of attacks. So I give it this image, but I mess with the numbers inside the image, right? And after I mess with the numbers, the model thinks like, oh, this looks like a dog, right? So that's a very simple example.
And by attack, do you mean like it's intentional by someone else's?
Yeah, there are some natural attacks, like unintentional attacks,
So
but
like just mistakes?
yeah, these things happen, but people intentionally modify inputs so they can like attack models. There are people out there that use these types of
I mean, recently Sora was out. What do you think about Sora?
Sora. It's mind blowing, honestly. Because, yeah, it's very impressive, I would say. But also, it kind of poses a lot of risks if you think about it. You can generate any type of video that you want, and that's a big risk. Uh, so Sora is like closed source, right? It's OpenAI owns it, and because they own it, they can put like security measures. But it's not going to be too long before open source models like Sora catch up, and anyone can use them, can modify them in whatever way they want. So there is a lot of security risks, but at the same time, it's still that's how technology works. When there's something being created, you can use it for good or for evil, I guess. Yeah.
Another professor, and I asked him about ChatGPT 4, and he said when ChatGPT came out, he said he wasn't that surprised.
Yeah, that's true.
Really?
Because the one of the main research papers that kind of that was like the founding paper when it comes to models like these was written in 2017 or 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And ChatGPT is very recent, 2022, right? November 2022. So that's about 4 to 5 years gap.
So would you say most AI researchers already expected this?
Yeah, kind of. If you sit and think about it, you kind of see it coming because there are models before GPT that were doing something similar, right? So if you sit down and think about it, like it's just putting a really nice looking website and at the back you put a generative model.
How does, in your own knowledge, how does AI go about having some form of knowledge and logic in their way of writing stuff and creating images?
That is a very good question. So
I've heard it's like a black box. Not
yeah,
you guys
that's
aren't
actually
100% sure. Is that true?
yeah, it's very interesting. So an example, I can give you like an example of why people think it's a black box. So we have these large language models that do a lot of things, right? And when it's smaller, it's very easy to kind of tell what it's going to predict. But the bigger it gets, there's something called emergent behavior or emergent behaviors. These behaviors that you don't expect them to appear, but they suddenly show up. That means there are certain things you don't understand about these large language models, right? So you know the basics of it, but as it gets bigger, it shows up these different behaviors show up. So it's kind of difficult to predict what might happen. Bigger companies, like I've said, OpenAI, Google, they do a good job at like making sure that things are predictable, but still, people can attack these models. For example, people can craft specific inputs to make them produce the output that they need. I've seen a couple of people trying asking ChatGPT when it was released, asking ChatGPT how to make like different weapons, like a machete or something, and it worked.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting because I'm pretty sure these companies put measures against those things, but you just need to modify your input very carefully. So the model, you can bypass these measures, right? And you can make it do what you want.
I was trying to jailbreak it, and they wrote like, "Oh, my grandma's dying," and then tried to connect it where it sounded like a moral, ethical thing to say that how to build a explosive bomb, for example. What are you most excited about in AI right now? What do you think are the new advancements that are going to come in general AI or maybe in your specific industry?
I think models like Sora, they, like I've said, they pose security risks, but also they can be used for so much education, uh, health, and all these different areas. They can be used in so many ways, and that's really a big deal because considering the number of fields that can benefit from models like this, you can even build like recently I saw research where you can build your own video game by just using text input, right? You get to tell it like, build me a game like Mario where the characters like this and the challenges are this, and it builds it, which is kind of impressive. So there's a lot of fields that can benefit from this, and I'm very excited to see how much it can change our lives essentially.
And your role you're trying to do is secure it so that the bad things are as
Yes,
less as possible.
yes, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how do you think so the way you secure AI is different from cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity that's how I started actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I started my degree, my PhD, I went with cybersecurity, information security to be specific. But eventually I realized like things are gonna change.
What is information security specifically?
Security of data, uh, to put it in simple terms. But then that was too broad, and I realized things are gonna change. And I'm grateful that I made the decision to like focus on AI, because seeing it now, I'm like, that was a good
I
decision.
mean, just financially as well.
Yeah, yeah, it actually makes sense. So I'm glad I made that decision.
I'm currently trying to learn AI, and this is one of my ways of trying to do it and help others learn it. And you give very simple explanations, so I love that. What would you say are ways you yourself learn and would recommend other people learn about first just general like AI, and then more specifically if they want to learn something more specific, something more near the breaking point of technology, which is what you're currently doing.
I see. Um, in my opinion, there's two levels to it. First level is if you want to understand how exactly the models work. There's a lot of statistics involved, and understanding that really helps. I don't like math, but
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
I'm not a fan. But I had to learn it, and eventually, kind of, I had to grow to like it. And that was one of the challenges that I had to go through. I'm still kind of working on it, but it does help you. It helps you understand a lot on how these models work, because the basic structure of these models is not very different. As it builds up, as you build different abstractions of these models, it kind of changes. But then the basic thing is essentially like a specific part of statistics like gradient descent and all these different types of ways to minimize your loss. So I won't get into that, but it's statistics. So that's the first level. But if you don't want to get into that specifics, and if you're like a programmer and you want to implement AI into your products or into something you want to build in the future, you can definitely read up on like conceptual things on how generative models work, for example, or how you can build your own LLM using different libraries, such as Hugging Face. They're pretty popular. So they provide you with these libraries, and it's very simple, right? You can build your own transformer model using like a couple of lines, so it's not very long. So this is like a second level. You don't have to get into the detailed abstraction that's involved in making these models. So whoever was interested, they can pick between these two levels.
Do you have specific resources for, I mean,
Specific.
high level, because you're doing
High
high
level.
level? Because I'm kind of like, there's not much written about that you're going in this. You're like an explorer going into this new field. Where do you find information to
I
work
see, I
with?
see, I see, I see. So I would recommend listening to, for those starting up, I would recommend listening to podcasts. It's like your podcast, obviously.
Thank you for recommendation.
But yeah, definitely listening to podcasts help. I love listening to the Super Data Science Show by John Cron, and that's one of my favorite podcasts because he invites all these different types of people that are involved with artificial intelligence, data science, and they break down things for you in a very simple way. So that's a really good place to start and to get you really interested into the applications and implementations of AI in different fields. So that's one place to start. And then you can like be more detailed, try to read textbooks, like high level textbooks, not very detailed ones. So that also helps.
Yeah, wow, that's, I'll definitely listen to
Yeah.
that.
Twitter also helps.
Twitter.
Yeah, there are specific people that organize this kind of data. And you can get different updates. You can use them as a basis to get newer information. And what I personally do is I look up like specific papers. So that's kind of detailed because you have to understand first you have to understand how to like dissect the paper, which isn't it doesn't always come naturally. You gotta like spend the time to do it. If not, there are a lot of YouTubers out there. Well, one of my favorite YouTubers is the 2 minute podcast. Hold on, the 2 minute paper. There you go, 2 minute paper. And I believe he's a doctor. I listened to one of the podcasts that he was on. He's a very interesting person, and what he does is he takes about 2 to 3 minutes to break down papers. And he's like, "Oh, this happened," and
Wow.
then he explains it in a very simple way. So, what I really enjoy watching the videos from that channel because it's not only something that's like mainstream, like Sora or something like that, but also he goes into these emergent things, something that might be important in the future as well. So that really helps. I'm pretty sure there's more out there.
Within like in the next decade, do you think it'll achieve like where it can almost be like a human, like,
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
and video as well.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
How much years?
How long?
Yes, how long would you say?
I'd say a year or two.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. Because considering the progress that I've seen in the past 2 years, November 2022 was I believe that's when ChatGPT was released, right? And it's been how long? About 2 years now. And we've seen so much progress, right? And I'm pretty sure after a year or two, there's going to be ultra realistic videos that are generated by models like this.
I think it was Elon and Sam Altman, and one of the things they talk a lot about is, or some people talk about, is that the advancement is going very fast, and there's not enough time to secure and make sure there's security involved. Do you think that's a big issue right now, that the development is too rapid for security to properly take its place?
Um, that's a good question. I think there should be more work done there, because most companies they try to do their best to make sure these lines aren't crossed where these models can be used for bad things, for example, right? But I think there should still be some sort of third party that overlooks these things. So, for example, there's companies that make standards for example, for Wi-Fi or like these different technologies, right? But for AI, I don't think there's a company that makes these different standards that everyone kind of follows, right? I think there should be something like that so that we can at least have some idea on how to manage if problems occur. I've seen several petitions being signed by like different people, including like Elon Musk, that said we need to kind of slow down and make sure that everything's secure. But on the other side, there's people that we just want to grow the technology and also get benefits out of it. You know, that's not a bad thing per se. You want to make money, definitely, you should go for it. But then you should always consider that if once we go too far, there might not be we might not be able to return, right? So it's always good to remember these things. I personally think we should kind of slow down and take it easy for a bit.
Yeah, but do you think that'll happen?
No.
No. In China, how do you think the AI sphere is there? Do you think there's other countries that are developing as fast as America, or do you think just America is way ahead of other countries in terms of AI development?
America, the U.S. is definitely ahead, I would say, but doesn't mean that China and all these like big countries, Russia, China, aren't doing there. But I've seen some research by Chinese researchers that is very impressive. They have their own like ChatGPT and I'm pretty sure Sora as well.
Have you played with them?
Not really, but as just heard about them for a bit, and I'm pretty sure they're doing their best. Especially the Chinese are pretty good at this kind of stuff. They mostly keep up. So, yeah.
What do you like about researching in your specific AI field, or just AI in general?
That's a good question. So I remember like a couple of times where I was genuinely impressed by what AI can do. I believe there was a documentary about AlphaGo. It's a reinforcement learning model that plays Go, the game, right? So when I watched that documentary, I was just blown away because there's this person. I believe his name is Lee Sedong. He's a Korean person. Even the match was in Korea around Gwanghwamun.
Wow.
I wasn't there, but when I watched the documentary, I'm like, I know this place, right? So DeepMind came all the way from the U.S. to Korea, and to have a match against this like number one player in the world, number one Go player in the world, and it beat the guy, right? That was really impressive. I found that very impressive because when they did the documentary, you can really see the emotions in the people's faces, right? It seems like this person that has beat every single other person that's competing in Go championships and whatnot. And when he lost against this AI model, you can see how he was feeling. He was very shocked, right? And it kind of makes you think like, is humanity like kind of losing against computers, right? But it also makes you think that this kind of technology can be used for so much more, right? I think that was one of the moments where I'm like, you know what, I should definitely get into this. But there has been different instances, like IBM, Gary Kasparov lost against IBM's computer a long time ago. But that wasn't really like AI. But recently, after watching this documentary, I thought for myself, maybe this can be something that can change the world. And it is actually changing the
It
world,
has the
right?
world's in my school. It's fascinating because everyone has started changing their majors, um, just applying them, and then they just switched, and it's just from one video from
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I think maybe going back to your roots, and you told me you're a founder before or partner, and you worked at startups, and you were born in Ethiopia, and it's a developing tech scene with one of the most people. How was it like growing up there? And
Um, it's been a few years since I went back to Ethiopia and like actually was involved in the tech scene. But when I was back there, it was still growing. There were a lot of people, talented people. I find it very interesting to see how much talent there is in Ethiopia. There aren't always good resources, but despite these difficulties, there still is a lot of talent. And one of the things that was impressive is that I sometimes I used to work on online platforms as a freelancer, and when I got into it, I can see there's a lot of Ethiopian freelancers that are working there, and and then most of these Ethiopian freelancers they're in tech, right? So I can see there's a lot of talent there. They have really good ratings. They are making a lot of money, which is a good indication to show that there is talent there, right? And what was impressive is that there aren't a lot of resources. Growing up, it was very difficult for me to find internet connection even, but after some point, it kind of got better. It's still a developing country. I love my country, but then it's still a developing country, right? It's still growing. But despite these difficulties, the first involvement that I got into, the first exposure that I got with AI was in Ethiopia. So yeah, that was
how were
very
you, what were
interesting.
you exposed to?
So there is an organization called ICOG Labs, and uh, they had these small robots that play soccer. Right, one of the first instances that I got to see AI doing something was when these uh, tiny robots are playing soccer against each other, and that was like, wow, that's interesting.
Then you're kind of hooked.
Yeah, I got really interested into it. Back then, it didn't really make a lot of sense. I even took like a few classes over the weekends, but none of it made sense until recently when I got more interested and had the chance and resources to explore AI until recently. But it was kind of interesting back then as well.
And how's it like being a doctoral researcher?
How's it? Uh, I like the fact that I get to kind of choose. There isn't like 100% freedom, of course. There's different specific areas that you have to focus on, but you can choose on what kind of implementations that you can do. And I really enjoy doing that. And also, you also have the freedom to kind of arrange your schedule in a way that you want, right? So I really believe in having a good schedule every day. Over time, it kind of adds up and it helps you a lot. So it helped me do that. Initially, was just a mess because I wasn't very good at time management. But afterwards, I kind of learned how to organize my time properly and use it towards the things that I enjoy and like, and my research as well. So yeah,
And you find that essential for being successful in AI is
yeah,
very
definitely,
rigid routine.
definitely, yeah. I think it's very important to have some sort of routine. If you don't have a routine, it's just gonna be a mess, right? So I kind of got into the habit of right when I start my day, I got into the habit of writing down what I'm gonna do throughout the day, and at the beginning of the week, I kind of write down the overview of what I'm gonna do. It changes, and sometimes I just have bad days and I get nothing done. It happens, but at the end of the day, you can kind of backtrack and see where what went wrong and kind of improve.
Yeah. And how does how do you go about doing AI research?
There's a lot of running code we don't understand. For me, at least, I read a paper, and if it has a code or like an experiment that is involved, that is connected with that paper, download it, try to run it, it doesn't work. I have no idea what's going on. So I think that's uh, where I kind of have to pause and take a look at the paper, understand the paper, and connect it with the experiment or like with the code. So one of the hardest things for me, one of the hardest things in my research is that you have this written paper, you have this concepts and math and everything, right? You have these diagrams and you have the code, and it's not always the same, right? In a sense that it doesn't directly relate. You have to make the connection yourself, right? And it takes time to do these things, especially the bigger the project gets, or like the research gets, the harder it is to make these connections unless you understand the paper really well. So yeah, we do have like servers running. It's a lot of fun doing these experiments, but it takes time to make progress, right? Like sometimes for weeks, you don't see a lot of progress, and you just keep hitting like running into like
That seems like what
walls.
AI has been for like before ChatGPT.
Yeah,
There wasn't a lot of excitement.
that's
And
true. Yeah.
what would you say are the personalities of the people that you work with, the AI researchers, the people who are in AI? Is there similar characteristics or things that they do?
I think maybe there's different types of people. Um, in my lab in my university, we usually have like similar patterns, I guess, working, but we work on completely different areas. We understand things differently. But looking at people not in Korea, people that have gotten to know through the internet and through their research, it kind of helps after you read something from a person. It kind of helps to get to know that person, so you can also understand how they got there. I would say like the reason that I started like following routines and like doing these specific things every day is by looking at these people that have done a lot. You get to see like, oh, they also have routines. Maybe I should come up with one. So I think that's for everyone, not just for AI researchers, but it does help. And also, um, I've said earlier that understanding math and statistics, it helps. So I got into that because of some recommendations from different people that I worked with. I believe if you're an AI researcher, and especially if you're doing master's or PhD, math statistics is definitely important. So it's good to get involved and kind of connect it with machine learning as well.
Talking about time, I just like to ask this question. How much hours would you say you spent on AI? Because I heard the 10,000 hours rule, and I'm just
Yeah.
fascinated by how much people spend.
Um, I can say how much I spend every day.
Yeah.
Every day I try to spend. I use a Pomodoro timer, and it really helps me like focus. Without that, it's a bit difficult because I get distracted very easily. I have to keep my phone away and like avoid all distractions. And, like have concentrated. If you concentrate to work for like 4 hours or like 5 hours, that's really good. Uh, there are some days when I'm like, you're just groggy and like tired, and you don't get anything. Even though you're like trying to focus, your mind goes elsewhere. So those days you barely get like I barely get 2 hours of work done. But the best days I get at least 4 to 5 hours of work done, and it is focused work, right? And if I get that kind of that amount of work done every day, over time it accumulates. It really adds up. I've I think I believe in like making small progresses every day. And if you do that, even though you don't see it immediately, over time it's just gonna add up. And I believe 10,000 rule. What is it called?
Yeah, 10,000 hours rule.
10,000 hours. It definitely applies, but over time, right? You can't achieve that over like 2 months. Definitely not. It takes a few years to get used to it. And even though sometimes you don't completely understand things, but try to understand why they're used, and eventually when you get back to it, there are moments that I'm like, wow, this makes sense. Very simple things, right?
Yeah.
I get back to it and I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know that it worked this way, but I've used it for so long, right?
That's very insightful because I mean, one of the reasons why I do this, like, I can't understand how people at a high level think because just growing up, this is the common misconception I think people see. You guys see a paper and you guys just fully understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you
It's
guys are like savants of the savants, just understand everything. But you would disagree. It takes time for you guys to learn.
Yeah, yeah. Especially understanding like research papers, it doesn't come naturally, right? It takes a long time. There are so every week we have these like labs, it's university lab seminars where we had to do like presentations. Initially, it took me like 2 or 3 days to understand like one single paper, but over time you kind of develop this understand like this sense of where the main topic or like where the main body of the paper is, right? Sometimes there's like background knowledge and things that are not really important, but eventually you kind of understand what the author is talking about, and that really does help. So over time you develop it. Like, I don't think it's something that maybe some people are gifted and they just understand it immediately. It's more like critical reading. So growing up, I read a lot of books that really helped. So I kind of have to find what the author kind of meant to say, and kind of not dismiss everything, but focus on the main section, I guess. So yeah, it takes a bit of time though. That's what I'd say.
You said you started a startup with your friends, and I'd love to understand what that startup is. And you said it went pretty successful.
So when we started off, we had all these different ideas, starting from financing applications, I believe, uh, online payment applications. That we had a lot of hotel applications. We had a lot of ideas because we were young, and we didn't have any funding. We were like these 4 or 5 or 6 kids that had no idea how startups worked, and gradually, I think through uh, watching different resources, especially YC startups, yeah, that was one of the biggest resources that helped me and my friends to like get on track and understand how startups work and how to build a successful product. They right now they're working on, I believe, an online payment app like Stripe.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Stripe?
Yes.
So Stripe is like pretty popular on the outside world, but in Ethiopia, things work very differently, right? So they're working on applications like that, and they've signed, I believe, a couple of agreements or like contracts with different banks, which is kind of impressive if you think about it. If you think about it being in Ethiopia as well, because we don't really have these kinds of systems in place in Ethiopia. It's still growing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're doing pretty good. They also do like freelancing projects for like different companies. So yeah, that's pretty impressive, I believe.
And what would you say are, I mean, if you have any insights on the issues and the things that are causing Ethiopia from not surpassing? Because it's something I'm interested as well, because I'm from Kyrgyzstan, and the system isn't really well developed. There's one ecosystem hub, and I've met people who say they've felt, in some ways, racism. People not working with them just because they had their name is sounds Russian.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
In Ethiopia, I'd say there isn't a lot of infrastructure by the government. I don't want to like point fingers or anything, but the bottom line is we still need to work on the infrastructure, making sure that this talent can grow into a startup, right? There's talent, and then eventually it needs some sort of support from the government. For example, in Korea, you can see a lot of support, right? There's a lot of funding. The government really encourages young people to always pursue like starting their own company and everything. But in Ethiopia, until at least during the time that I was there wasn't a lot of support. Maybe it's growing now. There's also the government's also there's a lot of bureaucracy which you have to like figure out how to get around, right? So there's an old system, there's new people, right? There's younger people, but the system is very
And there's a lot of younger people, right?
yeah, exactly.
You're telling me there are ads to limit kids from saying only have 2 kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I find that fascinating because we're recording in South Korea, and it's like there's ads for saying Korea gives you like $1,000 a month for a year for having kids.
Yeah, in Ethiopia, at least growing up, there were ads that are like, don't have too many kids, right? Because there are a lot of people, and the economy isn't as good. It wasn't as good back then. It's okay. It's getting better now, I guess. But yeah, there's just a lot of people even now. But hopefully, the government can figure out a way to kind of direct these people are, they're not resources, but they have talent. They have capacity to do things, right? If directed properly, the country can definitely grow.
Yeah, kind of like South Korea did. Yeah, and especially I met someone who has a staffing agency in the States, and he's Ethiopian himself,
Wow.
and he says they're super talented.
Yeah.
How's it like growing up in Ethiopia? Do you have a good memory?
Yeah. Growing up in Ethiopia, so I had really good friends growing up there. We had a lot of memories, especially when I went to university. We had we used to pull off these all nighters, either doing an assignment or like just doing like a random project, and it was a lot of fun. Most of the time, as I've said, we were very young, so we didn't know what we were doing, right? But the memories that we made back then, it kind of makes up who I am now, right? Uh, it really helps me kind of remember where I started, as well as what I want, where I want to go in my life, and what I want to do. Right. I think the goals that I have now are built by the things that I did back then, even though I didn't have any idea on how to do these things. But yeah, I loved spending like nights like talking about different things that we can do using tech. There's always this smart guy that knows all the tech, and there's always this guy that kind of brings everyone together, and there's this other guy that knows like the business and the people, right? So there's all different types of people, and they come together and they make something out of that, and that's I guess the beauty of starting your own company, I guess, if it
Just
all works well.
so it's like because it seems like just growing up just seemed like oh the all-nighters tech people are all in just Silicon Valley, but it's more spread out. And I felt that in Korea with myself. I did that with my friends.
I see.
It's an experience. What region did you grow up in?
I grew up in the capital. It's called Addis Ababa.
Yes.
It's it's the capital, so we didn't really experience a lot of like there's people from all over the country, I guess. But I was born in the capital. I didn't have a lot of exposure to like other regions, so I feel like I'm like one of those city kids that doesn't really know a lot about what's outside. But Ethiopia is very diverse, to say the least. There's a lot of different types of people there.
By different types, you mean like linguistically?
Linguistically,
Are they similar? Can you guys speak with all each other mostly?
sometimes no, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
There's all these different languages. There's about, I believe, 80 languages, if I'm not mistaken. That's a lot of languages. And there is like one national language, obviously. But then if you go to different regions, there are different languages. And I only know like one. That's it.
wow.
Because I grew up in the city, I don't really have exposure. My parents can speak too, right? And I kind of learned the language my parents spoke, but I'm not that good at it.
How do you say hello?
Wait, in my
Yeah.
in Ethiopian language,
Yeah.
you say salam.
Assalam. Oh.
Yeah.
So you guys are you
So
guys
sounds
Muslim?
like Arabic, right?
Yeah.
Salam
Is
alaikum.
Ethiopia mostly Muslim or Christian? Because I heard it was Christian a lot, and then
Yeah, Christians a lot. There are some Muslim, about 30%, I believe. I'm not very
so
sure.
it's pretty mixed.
Yeah, it is.
Fascinating.
It
Oh, I
is.
didn't
It
know
is.
that. What are your future goals?
Future goals. I like Korea because it's very convenient for a lot of things, and whatever you want to do, you can. It's not very difficult to at least get started with it. There's enough resources. I have enough time at my university to do my research and also pursue things that I want to do. So I might give Korea a try, like try to do something here, maybe do some sort of tech product. I'm not really sure. I think I have to finish my PhD first and then get into that. But yeah, that's the goal.
And when are you finishing it?
December. That's the plan.
December.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have to finish my thesis, publish papers. As a PhD student, you gotta publish different papers in journals. So I'm probably gonna do that in the next few months, and I have my thesis defense. Hopefully, I'll be done by December. So it takes a bit of time.
Who are your people that you look up to?
Um. So if I have to mention names, I really enjoy the work of Ian Goodfellow. He's very popular because we know ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's interesting. So Transformer is like one of the papers that was published in like 2019 or 2017, which got popular. So the part generative comes from a concept called generative adversarial networks. These networks are, to give a brief example, there are two networks against each other. One of them is like, it just makes up stuff. The other one is like, this is fake or this is real. So eventually, the one making up stuff, it gets really good to the point that whatever it's making up, it's as close as the real thing, right? So if it's supposed to make up cat images, it just makes up random stuff, and the opposer, like the discriminator, it's called, it tells you this is fake. And second round, it tries again, but a little better. But over time, it gradually builds something called a generator that's good enough to generate images like that. So that's kind of where it all started, like these image generation things. That's where it all started. So I think the paper was published in 2015, and Ian Goodfellow was the author of this paper. And I used to look up to him. I listened to a lot of his lectures. I think he works in Google DeepMind, if I'm not mistaken. So I really look up to him. I love reading his papers and all these different things. So one of the people that I follow on Twitter is, I follow his account, and whenever he speaks, it means there's actually something there, right? Whenever he talks about a topic, I'm like, oh, there's actually something there. There's potential there. So I really look up to him. Andrei Karpathy, he's very popular, yeah.
It's part of OpenAI, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. Andrei Karpathy. He's also pretty. He's written a lot of papers, right? As a PhD student, you know these people by their papers as opposed to like, oh, what kind of companies they work in. But eventually, I kind of got into that as well. Yeah, Andrei Karpathy is a very influential researcher. He does a lot of things. He did a lot of things for AI. So definitely, I look up to him. More recently, I got into, like I've said, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I really enjoy listening to the Super Data Science podcast. John Krohn, he's the person kind of, what is it called, leading the podcast, I guess. So I really enjoy listening to him. He gives a lot of good insight when it comes to like newer technologies, and also the way he talks to everyone that he invites. It's really, it kind of helps me understand other people's work, or like what kind of, how to kind of dissect different things in AI, right? Because he doesn't have all this knowledge. The people that he invites, they're from all sorts of different backgrounds in AI. So I really enjoy listening to him. So yeah, that's about it.
Those are your top three people.
Top three people.
Okay. I'm really thankful for your time, and this is the last question I ask my guests. Is what would you tell yourself if you could travel back in time to when you're 17 years old, and what would you say?
Ah, that's a good question. I would say know yourself. I know that's a little vague, but let me explain. So I think for me, especially recently, I had the time to kind of look at myself, and I'm like, what do I really want, right? I usually do certain things because everyone's doing them. It looks pretty cool, but I feel like I was missing the part where I'm like, what do I want? What do I enjoy, right? I think that's also like a habit that I developed growing up, but I kind of had to look at myself and look at my habits. I got into like discovering myself. It's a very cliche thing to say, I understand, but maybe for example, if I go back in time and talk to myself, to my 17-year-old self, I'll tell him like, just calm down, find out what you really want, and just go for it, right? By really want, I mean something that you love and enjoy. There is a Japanese thing called ikigai.
Yes.
That's also one thing that I discovered recently. So whatever you're doing, it has to be something that you love, something that helps society, something that you can make money for, and something, I forgot the fourth one.
That you're good at, I think.
That you're good at, yeah. These four things, these are very important. So just look at yourself and find out what you love. That's one of the things that you have to do. And hopefully what you love, you can make money with and also benefit society, and you're good at it. I think being good at it, if you love it, you spend enough time to be good at it, right? So yeah, just find out what I enjoy, right? So that's what I would tell myself, because I mean, I'm not complaining. I had a good life, and I'm thankful for everything that I have now. But I feel like I've spent a lot of time doing things that I didn't really enjoy, right? Or I didn't really love doing, because, oh, I could do this and I'm going to go for it. But I needed to discover myself and find out if I really enjoyed it. Just look at myself, you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Dingeto. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, he's done now. Oh yeah.